those introductions bear more than a small resemblance to what I expect my obituary to sound like in the fullness of time. But thank you very much, Martin. You're getting just a document I prepared to save my having to include these details in the paper I'm about to give. It's a timeline against which what I'll be talking about can be measured. I'm a bit of a fraud because the primary research I did for all of this gave me my PhD in 1987. And so the question is, why on earth am I resurrecting it now? Well, in Parliament, I organize an all-party parliamentary group on Haiti, which is a very successful business to heighten the awareness of parliamentarians to Haiti. And we are beginning to prepare for a symposium that will take place in the spring. The 17th of April, 2025, will be the 200th anniversary of the time that France imposed an indemnity on Haiti and forced a multi-million-dollar settlement in order to recognize Haiti's independence. When you think that the British government gave money to the planters, it was the Haitian government that gave the money to the French for their independence. And so we've got quite a high-powered symposium, and that drove me back, really, to look at some of the stuff I had looked at all those years ago. And I do see things in what I wrote then that I would have written differently now. So it's both old hat, but also kind of a bit of a tit-for. It's got a little bit of sort of style about it too. Well, I hope it has. And the other thing, just to be clear about it, I did, when I made the proposal, think I'd go to 1865, which is when the United States finally recognized Haiti's independence after their civil war, when it was possible to acknowledge that a Black nation might actually exist. But indeed, I have shortened it. It'll be 1804 to about 1830 or so, as you will see in a moment. So with that in mind, off I go. And I start with a quotation from a book by an old friend of mine, David Nichols, now alas gone. He used to be the priest at Littlemore Church here in Oxford, called From Dessalines to Duvalier. It's a key book for the study of Haitian history. The defeat of the French army in November 1803 put an effective end to Napoleon's ambition to create a new world empire in the Caribbean. Earlier that year, with the war in Saint-Domingue, which was the old name for Haiti, taking a turn for the worse, the French had sold Louisiana to the United States. But the significance of Haitian independence was greater than this. A rebellion of the free colored population, united to a successful slave revolt, had overthrown a white government. Haitian independence presented a radical challenge to colonialism, to slavery, and to the associated ideology of white racialism. With starting that way, it's a good backdrop against which to pick my way through the picture of the earliest phase of Methodism. It's against that backdrop that we must trace these beginnings of Methodism in Haiti in February 1817, just 13 years after the declaration of Haiti's independence. Two young Methodist ministers arrived in Port-au-Prince. John Brown from Cumberland and James Katz from Guernsey were welcomed with open arms. 22 months later, in December 1819, subjected to fierce opposition, they were forced to leave. That was, or should have been, that. There were no further Methodist missionaries until 1838, 18 years later. Hardly a success, but it's worth a serious second thought before reaching that conclusion. The arrival of Brown and Katz was the result of as polite an exchange of letters as you could possibly wish for. Francis Reynolds, a ship's captain, called into Port-au-Prince in July 1815 on his way back to England. This was a mere 11 years after Haitian independence. He came, he saw, and he wrote to the President of the Republic, Alexandre Pétion. "Would you like some Protestant missionaries?" he asked innocently. The Secretary of State replied on behalf of the President, "That would be lovely." I'm translating the French in a pretty sort of way. "That would be lovely. And by the way, if they could help with our educational needs, that would be even better." In the short time they were in Haiti, in the short term they were in Haiti. So too was Thomas Bosworth from the British and Foreign School Society in London, a qualified and experienced teacher in the Lancaster monitorial method. Pétion received the missionaries, this is the President, no fewer than 7 times. He died in March 1819, and his successor, Jean-Pierre Boyer, received the missionaries 4 times. That's 11 times in 22 months from the head of state. That's not bad, really, when you think about it. They were given freedom to travel, to open a school, and to hold public worship. In the period of 5 weeks at the end of 1817, armed with a letter of introduction from President Pétion, Brown traveled the whole length of Haiti's southern peninsula from Port-au-Prince to Jérémie. It's right out nearly in Jamaica. Katz undertook a similar journey in March 1818, but was unable to complete it because, as he noted, the roads were too bad, but even worse, he was prevented by the presence of anti-government revolutionary forces. Even so, in each town, the military commander welcomed the 2 men. Their meetings attracted people from a wide variety of social backgrounds. I should just say that throughout all this time, when Haiti became independent, it wasn't a straightforward straight line. The first president was assassinated 2 years later. There were factions, and it's all on the timeline, factions between mulatto bodies who had been educated in France, the sons of French fathers and Haitian mothers, and they wanted the country for themselves. It was France's richest colony and had generated more money for the French government than all the British colonies added up together. It was prodigiously rich. And so we must just bear that in mind. Well, now, the reports that the missionaries sent back to London described the state of the nation in this first chapter of its independent history. Ruined buildings, redoubts, unusable roads, a few scattered schools, Roman Catholic priests from Portugal and Spain the French had left after the wars, evidence of political instability. It's one of the earliest first-hand accounts of how things stood in Haiti in this opening chapter of its independent history. But it was in Port-au-Prince that the most concerted work was done and where a shape for the Methodist cause began to emerge. A whole week's program consisted of preaching, meeting in class, a Sunday school for adults, Bible readings, and pastoral visiting. The fellowship built up to around 30 full-time members with over 100 adherents, as we call them quaintly. 4 young men were destined to take significant responsibility for keeping the cause alive once the missionaries had been expelled. We know rather more about them than about the women, whose commitment and courage contributed greatly to the beginnings and to the survival of the cause. And in my rewrite of what I did all those years ago, I've tried to take a closer look at the women who were part of the equation at this time. Marie-Jeanne is known only by her first name. She was baptized in April 1818. She organized the visit of Brown and Katz to the mountains of La Selle, outside Port-au-Prince, in the summer of 1818. Marie-Marthe Michaud came to the Methodist services despite the beatings she and her sister Elizabeth received from their mother for so doing. They wished desperately to be able to read, and by the time the missionaries left, they could read their New Testament with ease. Aurore an African of the Nagos Oyo nation in West Africa, was a merchant in her middle age. Marie-Thérèse Jolicoeur lived in a suburb of the capital city, and her house was regularly used as a venue for prayer meetings. Amélie Deschamps and her daughter Zulma Noguès, surnamed Lotine, hailed from Jérémie, right out on the tip of the Republic's western peninsula. Madame Bauduit was the mother-in-law to Pétion's Secretary of State, J.C. Ambert. Madame Michaud and her daughter Nanette, Gillot Louis, Marie-Noël, Collinette, Souffrance, Argentine, Françoise Hercule, Rosite, Alexandrine, all these get mentioned by name only, the short and simple annals of the poor. The Methodist community in Port-au-Prince consisted of soldiers, merchants, a surveyor, illiterates, a leading member of the Roman Catholic Church, mother-in-law of a member of Pétion's cabinet, a maroon, some of those Haitians who'd escaped to the hills during the time of slavery and were coming back down the hills again now. Some are well enough established in the capital society to have their deaths recorded in the official records, others so humble that only one name survives. Indeed, one of the first members is simply referred to as an ex-slave. Some were from the capital itself, others from the surrounding countryside. And this represents a very wide cross-section of Haitian life. We also know that there were mulattoes and black members. I should just emphasize that you can, I mean, by the 1840s and 50s, there were two historiographical schools, that is, histories of that tumultuous period in Haiti's history. One school written by mulattoes and the other by blacks, and they saw two entirely different sets of realities, but there were big historical reflections. And it's just worth, I mean, David Nichols did a bit of it, worth just doing a comparative study of all of that. And if I had a little more time, I'd tell you a little more about that. But just to hint at it, it was a very real struggle, both for ideas, as well as social and racial realities, as well as instability and conflict on the ground. When the schoolmaster, Thomas Bosworth, died suddenly in February 1818, it was Brown who took over the school and earned a word of praise from the Abbé Haïtien, a journal that reflected the view of the government. "We note with pleasure," it ran, "that the Methodists who have come to preach the gospel among us with zeal and love have stepped into the breach. They've undertaken to continue the work of the school. Their readiness to do so deserves our fulsome praise." Just a few months later, that praise had turned to fierce anger. The incident which provoked this anger was the brutal murder of a woman by her son. The perpetrator had had some contact with the Methodist group and was known to be a disturbed person. The public rose up in protest and directed their outrage at the Methodists. Brown was beaten with sticks as he entered the preaching house. Rocks were thrown. It became necessary to suspend services. Brown and Katz sent Katz away from Haiti in early December 1818, and he himself followed soon afterwards. Contemporary records seem to concur that the root cause of the outburst was that the people were fired up by certain statesmen, I quote, "who may think it impolitic that white men should gain any influence among the Haitians." As Charles Mackenzie, the first British accredited diplomat in 1826 described it, and I quote again, "The government wished for the expulsion of the sectaries," that's in another inverted commas, "and the mob did what they were excited to do." President Boyer was courteous but firm. Things had to end. He granted the missionaries a £500 parting gift. Perhaps we shouldn't be surprised at these developments. It was, after all, a mere 15 years since the declaration of Jean-Jacques Dessalines that no white person should ever again direct the affairs of Haiti. we discovered in the Public Record Office here in Kew the original Declaration of Independence. I have a copy of it in my bag. And it is a fierce document. I mean, it was supposed to have been based on the Declaration of Independence that had been written by Thomas Jefferson, but it bears no real resemblance to it at all. It's full of anger. And it was part of the movement that saw all the white settlers who remained through the wars being slaughtered and assassinated. And that was the end. And so when these white missionaries came, it was rather amazing they were admitted at all. But equally, not at all amazing that they were forced to leave. Well, in view of all of this, it's surely amazing that the Methodist cause and the Lancaster School continued to exist. The school was taken over by a well-connected young Haitian named Pierre André. Brown reported that he was a member of respectability. Pierre André has a hand in writing the laws of the Republic and seems alive to the interests of his country. He is not white, said Brown. Forgive me that Brown has a color in his name as well. He was not white, said the missionary, and that was a key factor in the continuity that the school was allowed to have. John Brown wrote a farewell letter to the Methodist Fellowship. He urged the faithful to remain united, suggesting that a failure to do that would make them, and I quote, an easy prey for the enemy of your souls. He went on to recommend, and again I quote, our dear brothers Martial Évariste and Jean-Charles Pressoir to take on the leadership. They were to obey the laws of the land and the rules of society. Martial Évariste was a 26-year-old land surveyor and black. When I was ordained 50-something years ago in Haiti, it was just one of the great things about that moment for me, that the chair of the district, who was a mulatto, and my superintendent, who was black, both laid hands on me, as well, of course, as the president of the Methodist Conference in the Caribbean, who was black Jamaican, and a white missionary, Henry Keyes, who's now retired in Ireland. But this is a very pertinent point to keep on emphasizing. So Jean-Charles Pressoir was 20, the grandson of a French planter, and he was a mulatto. So those two boys who went out to maintain the cause in their 20s were from both sides of that particular divide. The struggle for power in independent Haiti was being fought out between black and mulatto-led groups. François Duvalier, Papa Doc, wrote a book. He was an ethnologist as well as a medical doctor. I have a lot more time for François Duvalier than Gray and Green ever did, but there you go. Le problème des classes à travers l'histoire d'Haïti. The problem of class in the history of Haiti. And class, for class, read color. He was black, and there had been too many mulattoes, and the morally repugnant elite, as we now call them, are the heirs of the mulatto, wealthy, French-parented group, who stand as an obstacle this very day to any progress being made in the political life of Haiti. So it's still alive. And as I say, David Nichols, in his From Dessalines to Duvalier, makes the same point and traces the same history. So it's important to note how the new young leadership of the Methodists crossed that particular gap. Together they stood firm against persecution, and there was plenty of it, until once France, together with a succession of other nations, recognized Haiti, it abated as quickly as it had arisen. That's, of course, the focal point of my renewal of interest in this particular phase of Haiti's history. It is an astonishing an amount of money, which represented 300% of the gross national product of Haiti at that time, that was imposed as a fine on them. They were repaying it until 1970. They did it faithfully. Because they could never repay it, they took out loans on the international markets, which, well, the loans at interest in order to repay France. just made that debt even bigger and bigger as the years went by, crippled Haiti's chances of ever making an economic fist of things. And so those who jump quickly to criticize Haiti as a basket case have to really realize just how much the poverty of Haiti and the chaos of Haiti is utterly caused by the international powers. And I haven't even mentioned America yet. But the astonishing thing is that new banks were set up in Paris in order to deal with the transactions servicing the loan. And out of those banks, for example, significant amounts of capital went into restoring the boulevards of Paris and putting up the Eiffel Tower, all on the backs of Haiti paying its debt. Not that that was the only money, but it was a significant chunk of it. And when the Americans invaded Haiti, 1915 to 1934, what was the first thing they did? They took the entire Haitian financial question out of the bourse in Paris and resank it in Wall Street, and then used the collateral and all the rest of it that resulted from those activities to lend the Haitian government vast sums of money to build railways, for example, which Haitians didn't want, in order to take American sugar to the ports for transport to America. It is simply shocking. Well, you can see what kind of a symposium we're going to have, can't you, as we move this whole thing forward. Well, President Boye, the second president, was no longer ready to accept foreign church leaders. He'd expelled a French pastor on those grounds. So the Methodists sent Saint-Denis Bauduit, aged 21, to Guernsey, where, under the superintendency of James Katz, returned to his homeland. He was trained and ordained for the Methodist ministry. He returned in 1826 and was to play a major part, not only in the oversight of the Methodist cause, but in the development of a Baptist congregation. They came in the mid-1820s, and also in work with American blacks. Now, that's an interesting one to write a book about, actually, because prior to the Civil War in America, there was no such thing as a free black person. There was no citizenship for such people. They could pay for and earn their freedom, but what did their freedom amount to? So before they bought Liberia and sent free blacks there, they sent them to Haiti, the only free black nation in the world at that time. And they brought their culture and their spirituals, and they had a spiritual that was called, I wish I could find the words and the music for it. Hey, Moses is gone to Haiti, said the musical. Well, so Bauduit, this young man, was an ordained man and at the heart of all the developments that then went on with these other two young men alongside him. In 1838, almost 20 years after the expulsion of Brown and Katz, a man named Mark Baker Bird, who was to become the most remarkable Methodist leader of the 19th century, arrived in Haiti. He lived in Cap-Haïtien until 1842, when the city suffered a disastrous earthquake. So he relocated to Port-au-Prince and discovered, to his and everyone's surprise, an active community already in place. Évariste had been hounded out of his leadership role, but not before he and Pressoir, ably supported by Bauduit, had laid the foundation for a church that was almost from the beginning a truly Haitian institution. This is worth noting because it was happening in the midst of what can only be called a maelstrom of events which saw this brand new nation seeking to invent itself by harmonizing internal and competing energies, while at the same time withstanding a welter of malign forces from the outside world. An indication of this perfect storm is given in the timeline that I've supplied you with. The 22 months spent in Haiti by John Brown and James Katz were played out against this background. It's astonishing that the leaders of Haiti, through these torrid times, marked as they were by fears without and fightings within, their nation shunned by the world at large, still had so much time for the Methodists at all. Equally amazing was what happened after the Great Ejection. There was no further missionary presence till 1838, over 15 years without any foreign or outside leadership at all. This vacuum threw up these three young men that I've mentioned and an indomitable group of believers who resisted all attempts to destroy their fellowship, who set their faces against persecution and attempts to damage their reputation. This set the seal on a truly Haitian Methodist church, whose character and ethos had been defined and refined under the most severe pressure. And this was what the missionaries found when they eventually returned. One of them referred to this great act of survival as proof of his phrase, heaven's peculiar smile. And there is my little paper for you, my dear friends.